Hello and welcome to my FlossTube channel. I'm Jean Farish, and once again I am really happy to be here with you. It's been a while. It's been a couple weeks since I've been with you. I've been just busy with a lot of things. I spent a nice long weekend with my sisters sorting through photographs and sharing all kinds of memories. And that was really a special time. So just been busy with life, as I'm sure you have been too. So my big project right now is working on a sampler for the 2024 Stitchers Escapes cruise around the British Isles. Now this is going to happen in June of 2024. Registration is open right now, and we still have places left. So if you're interested in stitching while you cruise, please join us. But right now what I want to talk about is, again, a little bit of that design process that I follow when I am stitching something with a very clear focus. This sampler will be part of the swag for this cruise, but I'm also designing it with keeping in mind publishing it after the fact, just for anybody who wants to stitch it. And so I'm hoping I'm going to succeed in both regards. Now, my focus for designing this sampler was to start with the itinerary, and we are going to be visiting all 4 parts of the UK. We're going to begin and end in Amsterdam, and during the cruise we'll also have 3 days for classes, and I'll share with you the projects that I'm going to stitch later on. But for right now I want to talk about the sampler. So we're going to have 3 ports of call in Scotland. We're going to be in Edinburgh. We're going to be in Inverness to see Loch Ness, and we're going to go to Glasgow. Then we're going to go to Belfast in Northern Ireland, and we're going to go to Dover and Liverpool in England. Finally, we'll also visit Holyhead in Wales. So that encompasses all 4 parts. So therefore, I needed to include the symbolism for all 4 parts. The Tudor Rose for England, the Shamrock for Northern Ireland, Daffodil for Wales, and the Thistle for Scotland. Now the Thistle I already had designed because I'm kind of pirating that from one of my own designs where I used a thistle. And that particular thistle design came from an antique sampler that I studied at the Victoria and Albert Museum decades ago. All right, so that's where I started. And so I'm going to have a band in the sampler for each one of those flowers. Then I started thinking about the quote. And oh, I should also say, for the itinerary, we're also going to go to one of the Channel Islands. We're going to go to Guernsey. And you may identify Guernsey with a wonderful novel and movie called The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. And if you've read the novel upon which the movie was based, you will know that that was the name of their book club that they kind of came up at the spur of the moment when 2 of the islanders were caught after hours by the German soldiers who had were occupying Guernsey. I think I've got that part of the plot right. At any rate, so I kind of went back to that novel. I didn't reread the whole thing, but trying to find a quote from that novel so that I could incorporate that as part of the sampler. Lots and lots of funny quotes. Well, I should say, and not funny haha, but just sort of just made me smile. And lots of insightful things, but nothing that really would work with everything else going on in that sampler. So I decided to fall back on a very traditional Irish blessing, and that is the one that is, may your joys be as deep as the oceans and your troubles as light as its foam. And I picked that one because it kind of circled back to the whole idea of being on a cruise at sea. And of course, it being an Irish blessing. So those were like the 5 main components for this sampler. And I decided to follow the same format I have been following for what I call my ampersand samplers. And interestingly enough, the quote has that ampersand in it. So that's going to be the basis of it. And here's kind of a quick look at what the whole sampler is going to look like. Still shifting around the colors of the interior borders. And it's going to also include, and you can see that I'm still working on that part, where it will say Stitchers Escapes Cruise and have the names of all the places that we'll be visiting on that cruise. Now later on, after the cruise is over and I publish this, I will change those 2 parts to be more generic. Anyway, so that's where I am in terms of the design. So now it's time to stitch, and the bridge between the sampler design concept and the stitching, of course, is the floss choices. So this is a photo I took when I was just exploring the possibilities. So the floss doesn't look very pretty here as far as it's just sort of crooked and whatnot, but it's kind of just my working photo so I could just see how the colors were going to play with each other. Now, the linchpin in this color scheme is the border with the shamrocks, because on that one you only have the one color, and that's the green, and I have 3 different shades of the green. And so I had to pick that first to see how those 3 colors were going to play together. All right, now I try not to waste a lot of time with stitching. Now, it would have been a simple thing just to take a scrap piece of fabric and stitch one section of that shamrock and see how the colors look together. But as you and I both know, that's an hour plus worth of work. So I just wasn't just going to do that. So I decided that I would kind of create the framework of the sampler and get the border started and then stitch that shamrock part. All right, now the challenge, of course, is finding the exact right place for that shamrock border. So that's what I wanted to show you in this photo. Now keep in mind, this is not my general process for stitching and not one I'm necessarily advocating when you have a finished chart in front of you. In fact, I have to say that this is pretty much contrary to how I normally stitch, because I normally stitch an area and then I will stitch the very next adjacent area. I don't count over big expanses to continue a color or whatever. I am self-described a lazy stitcher. I am not going to do any more work than I have to. So that's why when I'm stitching something like a sampler, I would normally start this in the upper left-hand corner, stitch a little bit. This border is not complicated. It's not like your traditional sampler that you are worried if your corners are going to meet. So I don't have that to think about. But that said, what I normally would do is just stitch that border as I come to it, simply because otherwise it would get kind of boring. Just to stitch that one color in a straight line and to stitch kind of that, what an architect would call a dental molding design across the top and bottom. So that would be normally what I would do. So all this basting that you see was done so that I could get to the exact right place of that shamrock border. So with that in mind, these little red stitches mimic where the grid lines are in my working chart. Now, where these lines appear on the chart that you might see if you come on the cruise, and I hope that you do, or if you buy the design later on, the placement's probably going to change some. But for my working one, so I came down what would be the equivalent of 3 squares and stitched a little red line. And then I counted down what would be 10 squares. I'm stitching over 2, so that's 20 linen threads. And I did that all the way down. And then to double check, and by the way, I counted each one of those sections at least 3 times. Basting is your friend unless you miscount. Then it is not your friend any longer. So you are relying on your own accuracy throughout the rest of the sampler. So check and double check and triple check. So after I did that, then I came down, and the little green lines that you see, the little green threads, are where I did, well, the first one's not quite 50, so it's 43, and then after that, it's every 50 down to the bottom. So then it was easy for me to see exactly where that shamrock border was going to be placed. At that point, I added the blue stitching to indicate where the very top of the shamrock border would be and the bottom. So that's sort of a belt and suspender approach to this, but I just didn't want to find myself ripping out. And to clarify, I'm going to be able to use these guidelines when I test stitch all the other borders. So that's what I did with this. And again, this is a not normal routine for me for stitching any kind of a sampler or any kind of a project. But the one I needed to use because I didn't want to waste time stitching that shamrock, any part of that shamrock border, just for nothing. So at this point, I have my 3 greens that I want to use for that border. And next, I'm going to start working on the thistle, and then the Tudor rose, saving the daffodil to last, because I'm going to tell you what, in my 40 plus years of designing cross stitch, I've had my share of challenges, but trying to do something that represents a daffodil that's easily recognizable as being a daffodil in a tiny little space is a challenge. So I'm still not entirely sure that I'm going to be using what you see here. This is a work in progress as far as the design is concerned. So it's not at the bottom for that reason. It's at the bottom for the balance of colors. So this has been kind of what's been occupying me the last couple of weeks, and I will be sharing the progress as I go along here, and also on one of the Facebook groups that I started called, it's just JFNSAL, standing for Jean Farish Needlework Stitch Along, and I welcome you to join it. It's dedicated to my own work, announcing places that I'll be teaching, etc. But also a place for people to share their own progress when they're stitching my designs. Now, I'm going to just be really clear here. This is not an egotistical thing necessarily, but this is not a general needlework site. This is one for people that are stitching my designs that might have a question or just want to brag on a finish, or ask for encouragement, or just, you know, sometimes you just want to show where you are just to get a little pat on the back, which is sometimes what you need to keep going. So that's where I'll be showing progress for this, as well as here on the Floss Tube channel. I think that's all I wanted to say about that. So that's a lot. And moving right on. If you are interested in dyeing fabric, there are lots of floss tube tutorials out there. And it seems like every other day somebody's posting on social media either a question about how to do something, or asking for advice, or somebody just saying, hey, here's something I just dyed and here's how I did it. Not quite ready to do that, but I just want to share a couple of things. This is fabric that I dyed for the workshop I'll be teaching at Barefoot Needleart in Surfside Beach, South Carolina. It's very close to Myrtle Beach. And that's the end of this month, April 29th. So that class is the tropical scissor fob. And I knew ahead of time when they first asked me to come and teach there that I would have to dye another batch of fabric. So here are just a couple of tips and just some, I don't know what category to give this. Anyway, here's just some things I want to share with you about dyeing fabric. First of all, I just used RIT dye, and I followed the directions. I didn't just rely with what was on the bottle, but I went to the RIT dye website and followed their advice when I did it originally. Second time around, this most recent time, I had printed out those directions, but you know, have you ever done this where you are just so sure of how to do something, you just sort of skim over the directions, or if you're cooking something, you skim over the recipe and you miss something? Well, the second batch, what I missed was adding the salt. And I don't know whether or not that had any direct impact on the finished product, but that is one of the steps I left out. Other than that, I followed directions. Now, I didn't just use straight from the bottle dye. I used 3 different colors and combined them to get what I'm calling this tropical blue. Now, this piece is the first one that I dyed. I don't know whether or not my camera is going to pick up these subtle differences, and whether or not when you're viewing this with whatever device you're watching it on, whether you'll see the difference. But this first one has a little teeny tiny more of a green tinge than what I ended up with. Hold on, I do need to get one more piece of fabric. Now, of course, when I made the first batch of fabric last summer, actually it was probably a year ago, because I would have made it in the spring for a workshop I was teaching on a different cruise last summer. I knew which colors I used as far as straight out of the bottle colors, but I didn't write down what proportion. So this is the fabric that I dyed with the intention of it being for my class at Barefoot Needleart. But you can see that compared to what I dyed a year ago, big difference in color. So I felt like I had the color right, but man, this was really intense compared to what I expected to get. And I will tell you that I barely dipped this fabric in the dye bath when it got to be this deep. So I can't imagine what it would have been like if I had dyed it for 15 or 20 minutes. So I have this wonderful batch of fabric that I will use at some point, but I'm going to have to design something to go with it. I already have something in mind. I'm seeing kind of a creamy white design on this brilliant blue. Anyway, okay, so that didn't work. But I felt like I had the hue right. It was just too intense. So at that point, I dumped that dye bath into, well, I poured it into quart jars, and I ended up with like 4 quarts of dye. And then I filled up I have a humongous, 6 or 8 quart pot. So I just used 1 of those quarts and filled the rest of it up with water. And that's when I got the right color. And that's this color. Now, again, compared to my control piece, it's not, it's not quite as green, but I felt like it was still a good choice and not one that I had to apologize for. So that's one lesson I want to share with you, is be really, really careful about the intensity or the saturation, the concentration of the dye. And if you feel like your color is right, but it isn't going to be able to stay in the dye bath long enough to really saturate the fibers, then just dilute it. And so that's what I did there. So that's one thing. And the second thing is about your base fabric color. I don't know if my camera's going to pick this up, but when I'm not looking at this on camera, I can really tell the difference between these two pieces of fabric. And the only difference is the base fabric. Both of these were in the same dye bath, the same amount of time. The difference is that this one started out as an off-white, and this one started out as a pure white. That's the only difference in the dye process for these two. So do realize that the color of your base fabric, even if it's just an off-white, is going to affect the end product. So that's one thing. And you will see, like, all these pieces I have, they're all zigzagged. I cut and zigzag my fabric before I dye it, so that I'm handling smaller pieces of fabric. Oh, one other thing is, in all cases, make sure you pre-wash your fabric. Okay, rewind, back up, Jean. If you want a pure color, make sure you pre-wash your fabric. If you don't pre-wash it, then the dye may be absorbed unevenly, because all fabric from manufacturers, unless it's a home-based product, anything that's commercially manufactured is going to have some kind of sizing in it, and you want to wash that out before you dye your fabric. I think that's about all. Anyway, it's a fun experience, and while I'm doing it, I'm telling myself, oh, I'm never doing this again. It's a lot of hot, heavy work. But then when I get done and I look at this fabric, I'm thinking, man, I can't wait to do it again. By the way, depending on when you're watching this, it's not too late to register for that Barefoot Needleart class. I don't think it's full yet, but I'll put the information in the episode description so that you'll know phone number to call, etc. If you live anywhere near Barefoot Needleart, if you have not gone yet, you really need to treat yourself and make a trip to the shop. And I hope it's on a day that I'm there. That would be fun. This fall, I'm going to be teaching in Hershey, Pennsylvania. This is a retreat, a 3-day retreat that's organized by LinAnn events. Actually, I guess it's 4 days. Starts on Thursday, the 5th, 6th, yeah, 4 days. The 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th of October. And it's, like I said, it's going to be in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Mainly, I'm going to sit and stitch and enjoy myself with people like you, people that just enjoy stitching as much as I do. But I am going to be teaching a couple of classes during the course of the weekend, and I will also be there as a vendor. So I'm hoping in between all that I'm going to get to chat with a lot of people and get a lot of stitching done. October, I may still be stitching on this sampler. I don't know. We'll see. Speaking of classes, last month I got to teach for the Winchester EGA up in Northern Virginia. Absolutely gorgeous country. I mean, I am a Virginian born and bred, and I just love our state. But I hadn't really explored that whole Winchester area, and I want to go back again. In fact, that's really what I want to talk to you about, because obviously that class is long gone. While I was there, I was so impressed with the incredible talent and range of stitching interest that I saw in this group of women. It's a vibrant EGA chapter. I don't know. I just felt like I felt like I was coming home. I loved it. And while I was there, I picked up this little flyer that they had. And I'll put this information in the episode description. But this is, they're calling it Not Just Your Mother. I can read, I really can. Not Just Your Grandmother's Embroidery. And it's April 29th to May 13th. And it gives the information about where it is. But this is going to be an exhibit of the work that the members have done. And just the little teeny tiny taste I got while I was there of seeing the work that these women are doing, I was so impressed. So if you're in that area, or you're just looking for a day trip, it's a beautiful, beautiful part of the country. There are lots of bed and breakfasts in the area, and they're just a wonderful group of people. So I will also include an email address that if you're thinking about going and you just want to say, hey, I'm coming, can you suggest places to eat or stay or whatever, I am sure that they will put the welcome mat out. I'm going to try to get back up there for this. It's going to be really, really a nice exhibit. But I didn't think about this till just now. But also while I was there, one of the members' work really caught my eye, and that's Lucy Edmondson. And Lucy is a counted canvas designer and teacher. And I just this big light bulb went off. Practically blinded myself. I had been looking for a counted canvas teacher to come on that 2024 British Isles cruise that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode. And when I saw Lucy's work, I immediately texted Catherine and Elizabeth, who are like my right and left hand, or two right hands, or they're as much a part of the Stitchers Escape cruises as I am. Anyway, I don't make these kinds of major decisions without asking them. So I quickly texted them, took a couple of photos and said, what do you think? They both texted back and said, great, Mom, go for it. And so I talked with Lucy right then. She needed a couple days to think about it. I completely understand. She talked to her family, and long and short of it is she's going to be teaching on that British Isles cruise. And these are the pieces that she's going to be teaching for us. And I am just really, really excited about this. By the way, if you stitch on linen, but you've never stitched on canvas, counted canvas work is the perfect bridge from one to the other. Counted canvas work is very, very similar to counted thread work as far as if you can read a diagram, you can do the work. And actually, speaking of counted canvas work, this is a project that I just started that's a Debbie Rowley design. And Debbie's teaching on our 2023 cruise. And we talked about her offering a second or third colorway of a class that she had already committed to teaching for us. And I volunteered to stitch this one, and I'm having a ball doing it. So it's been wonderful. One thing I find with doing this type of counted canvas work for Debbie, there are so many different types of threads that are used. So the range of needle sizes that are required is pretty broad, because I'm going from 2 strands of floss to ribbon to watercolors, which is like a pearl cotton. So I started using my handy needle case. Hello, Jean. Yes, it's called a needle case because it holds needles. And I really like this. But what I found was a challenge was putting it on my ring that have all my threads on it. So I decided to add this, let me change this. I added a lobster claw to this one, and I'm going to be adding those to the ones I'm going to sell on my Etsy store, because I think it really makes it a whole lot more useful. So if you already bought one from me at one of the places where I was a vendor, This is an easy fix. So that's what I'm going to be doing with those. Anyway, so that's going to be in my Etsy store as soon as I finish this up and get it edited and get it posted. And I think that's about it. I think that's all I needed to share with you today. I know it's a lot. Anyway, thank you for spending this time with me. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit that little bell icon, which is how you'll get reminders when I do have a new episode. And between now and then, stay happy, stay safe, and I'll see you later.